you're listening to this or wherever you're listening to this. If you're catching us the next morning, I appreciate that as well. We're going to have a brief show tonight. I'm not going to go too crazy. I actually have some really exciting things in the works coming soon, which I will talk about on this show. First, I'm going to give a couple moments here for the live audience to get settled. Um, Turn off my screens here so there's not as much glare for those of you that are watching live. But I am going to get engaged in what we saw in the NBA playoffs this weekend. We had 3 Game 7s this weekend, which was really exciting. We had some Game 7s in the NHL as well. I did not watch any of the hockey Game 7s, unfortunately. So if you're tuning in here for hockey analysis, I think you're in the wrong place. I honestly, I think the NBA postseason has, I don't want to say it's become predictable, but what we saw take place this weekend was one of the most unique things that I can recall. And I guess it's really not that unique, but it's definitely a phenomenon, is how I'll describe it. A modern phenomenon in sports betting. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a minute. But first, before we get started, please like and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing more live episodes like this. I enjoy just hopping on right after the games end, especially on a Sunday night, and just sharing my thoughts with you. And hopefully it helps you, entertains you, distracts you from the craziness happening in the world in some way, shape, or form. So please like and subscribe to the channel. Put the notifications on. You'll be notified whenever we do go live. I try to make an announcement on social media as well. And I'm going to be going live on Twitter too. So very excited to do more of this instant reaction type of content. And also stay tuned. I have a fun interview planned this week. I'm going to be doing more. I'm calling it my summer interview series. I don't know if I'm going to call it that. Who knows? But that's what I have in mind, where I do a little bit less of the weekly chats, especially once we get into the summer doldrums, which are coming very soon, where there's no NBA and there's no NHL and it's just baseball every day and maybe some random NFL news thrown in. But I do have one fun interview planned for next week. I don't know when I'm going to release that interview. Maybe it'll be next Sunday. Maybe I'll hold off until later in the summer, depending on how the interview goes, depending on what we discuss and all that fun stuff. But I do have a very fun interview planned for next week. I will give you a hint. It is NFL related. It is actually someone who used to work in the NFL and someone who used to work in the front office of the NFL. And we're going to talk about the draft, and he's going to share some stories from the war rooms, and it's going to be a really good time. I'm very excited to have a chat with this person next week, and I will not only promote that interview, but we will release it. I'll probably release it next weekend, probably next Sunday night, but we'll see. Don't hold me to that. I don't want to promise you guys something and then not deliver on that promise. All right, let's talk about the NBA because we just witnessed 3 Game 7s over the weekend. All 3 games had their moments that they were relatively exciting. I thought the Celtics Sixers game had the most pizzazz to it. Obviously, that was the only upset of the bunch. The other 2 favorites won. The other 2 favorites covered. But really, the totals is what I want to talk about here. So I'll get to some predictions for the rest of the playoffs in a bit. But you've probably, if you're a gambling person, if you're watching this show, you're probably at least invested in gambling in some way. You've probably heard the phrase, Game 7, bet the under. And that trend has been profitable over the years. Even though all 3 Game 7s this weekend went over in interesting ways, that has been a profitable bet over the last couple of decades. If you just blindly bet every Game 7 in the NBA under, you're hitting at about 60%. But recently, especially over the last couple of years, that has not been a profitable bet. In fact, over the last 2 seasons, you are down if you bet the unders in Game 7 in the NBA playoffs. And I think the big reason for that is me and people like me who get on these shows and talk constantly about under in Game 7 and giving out these information, giving out all this information. The market has now overadjusted. And I'll give you a great example of that. In fact, this round that we saw, this group of Game 7s that we saw over this weekend, it was the best example that I can ever see of the market making a bold statement about where we are as a reactionary gambling culture. So, Celtics Sixers, game 7 landed 209. The prior 6 games, here were the totals: 216 and a half, 217 and a half, 215 and a half, 213 and a half, 214 and a half, 213 and a half. So game 7 landed 209. It would have stayed under in all 6 of the prior games in the series. The game 7 total was 204 and a half. It was a 12-point adjustment from game 1. It was a 9-point adjustment from game 6. So you have to ask yourself, and I know Jason Tatum, is he worth 9 points to the total? Tough to say that he is. And even if he was, the game still would have stayed under in all of the other games of the series. But in game 7, it went over. Let's take Magic Pistons. The game 7 final score landed 210. Here were the other 6 totals in the prior games of the series: 221 and a half, 218 and a half, 215 and a half, 213 and a half, 210 and a half, 209 and a half, and then 200 and a half. Wild. So game 7 landed 210. Depending on where you got that game 6 total, it was in the 210 range. All 6 of the prior games either matched or stayed under the total. But the adjustment in game 7 pushed it over. Massive adjustment. A 21-point adjustment from the game 1 total to the game 7 total in Magic Pistons. Way too big of an adjustment. There's no way you can make the case that the game 7 jitters and the slow pace should make a 21-point adjustment from the first game of the series. It's overbaking. Significant overadjustment. Raptors, Cavs, same thing. 222.5, 222.5, 219.5, 219.5, 218.5, 219.5, 218.5, 219.5, 218.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, 219.5, it just doesn't make any sense to be betting unders in game 7 anymore. I think we need to have a big come to Jesus moment about the game 7 unders. I just don't think they are. I don't think they're a good bet anymore. So if you're out there preaching bet the unders in game 7, I think you need to put the context of the other 6 games in the total. You need to put that in context before you make the claim that, hey, we're just going to be betting unders in game 7s. Because if you bet overs this weekend in game 7s, you went 3-0. All right, so the rest of the playoffs, like, I'm not going to claim that I'm this big NBA expert because I'm not. However, I do think the Knicks might be going to the finals, guys. So of the 4 teams remaining in the Eastern Conference, Knicks, Pistons, Cavs, Sixers, I think the Cavs, like, I think it's Cavs, Knicks. I think that's going to be the Eastern Conference Finals. I do think I mean, I was actually surprised to see how big of a favorite the Knicks were in game 1 with a healthy Sixers team. I just think Boston was on fumes, and I think the Knicks are a much better matchup for this Sixers team. They're going to body Embiid in the paint, and I think that's going to be a more difficult challenge for him. Boston just did not have enough girth in the paint to really keep up with Embiid. And to credit, the rest of the roster played really well for Philly, and I think Boston kind of just missed all their threes and couldn't really get over the hump. I think the Cavs are still a tough team. I really do. When I watch them, and I know Harden gets a lot of crap, and Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs. They haven't exactly been gangbusters, but I think they're a really talented team. I think Kenny Atkinson's a great coach. I think Cavs Knicks would be a really fun Eastern Conference Finals. I do not trust the Pistons, and I know that they won pretty handily in Game 7 on Sunday, but I just do not trust this Detroit team as far as I can throw them. So I'll say Knicks Cavs will be my prediction in the Eastern Conference. And the Knicks going to the finals. It'll be a whole lot of fun. The West feels pretty cut and dry. I mean, I would be shocked if anybody beat the Thunder in a 7-game series. I hope the Spurs give them a series. I hope that Wemby, like I think Wemby has a chance to really ascend and become the greatest player in the sport. Like I think he's on that track right now. He's not there yet, but he's definitely on the pathway to it. And the way that you do that is you perform in the playoffs. Well, he's going to get a chance to do so against the defending champs, most likely, unless the Timberwolves pull off that upset. But based on what the odds are telling me, it does look like Spurs T-Wolves is going to be a one-sided series. Spurs are a minus 1,000 favorite. The Thunder are a minus 2,000 favorite. Like even if you parlay those together, you ain't getting any value. So I just think there is going to be a Spurs Thunder Western Conference final, and I would say the Thunder make it to the NBA Finals. It kind of feels like there's nobody beating the Thunder this year, and it's unfortunate because it's not going to be very sexy if we get a repeat champion. But I mean, greatness is greatness. I really don't care how sexy the finals are. If you're great, you're great, and if the Thunder are able to prove that over the long haul, and good for them. And I think we've reached that point in the NBA calendar where the cream rises. And the Knicks, what they did to the Hawks in Game 6, and that was pretty damn impressive. Great teams are able to rise to the moment in the tough game and put away the lesser teams. You didn't see Detroit do that against Orlando. You know, they needed to come back from a 3-1 deficit to win that series. Obviously, Boston up 3-1 in the series, lost 3 straight. Like I guess you have to credit Detroit and Philly for overcoming those demons, but the first round of the playoffs typically is pretty chalky in the NBA. And we did not see that from the good teams. The Celtics were the favorites to win the Eastern Conference. I tweeted this out last night. The Celtics were the favorites to win the Eastern Conference. Let me find this tweet right here. So they lost 3 straight closeout games in the first round by a combined 57.5 points against the spread. That was the favorite to win the East. That is just, you just can't do that in the playoffs. So Boston, I think they're a team that obviously was fighting maybe some injury issues. The Jason Tatum thing was unfortunate, but he came back really early and he just didn't have any petrol left in the tank to close things out. And Boston was just jacking up threes. I mean, I really don't think they deserve to be the favorite in the East. I think it was on reputation only. The Knicks and the Cavs look to me to be the best teams based off of what we saw in this first round. And to be fair, I thought the Raptors played valiantly. They were fortunate to win Game 6 on the crazy shot by RJ Barrett off the heel. I think it's Knicks Cavs. I think it's Knicks Cavs in the Eastern Conference Final, and it's the Thunder in the West. And the Thunder are going to be a massive favorite in the NBA Finals. All right, I really don't have much else for you tonight. Again, I just wanted to quickly wrap up what we saw in the NBA playoffs this weekend. I see a few people watching in YouTube. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'd be happy to answer them for you. I've got a couple of other things going on. Of course, the Patreon, I'm offering a major discount this month, 55% off for May, double nickels. The links are in the description below. That's where I drop all my daily wagers. I'm hot and heavy in Major League Baseball right now. We're on a heater with the Nerfies, man. 9-2 to start the year with Nerfies. So very exciting start to the season with baseball. And I'm working with a new data company called Betalytics, and they are providing me with some really good data. So if you want to get in on that, free trial, 7 days, and 55% off monthly subscriptions. And I would be happy to answer your questions. Feel free to DM me if you have any questions about that as we move forward. There is one story I wanted to talk about tonight, and I want to at least tie a bow on this Diana Russini, Mike Vrabel thing, because it seems like this story just continues to um, unravel for Rossini for sure. Um, so the big news this week, there were two things I want to talk about this week. First of all, the story about how she saved like an old man and a dog from a car wreck. That turned out to be complete garbage. And I want to make sure that people know it wasn't her and her people, at least I don't think, that was putting that out there. I think it was like secondhand information, and all of a sudden, like, she got involved in that story. That story was completely untrue. I think she was just like driving by and was like a bystander in the situation. So it just like really weird things keep happening. We had the Spotify playlist that people found, or someone found, and I'm actually trying to get more information from that person, because he does a really good job. I think his name is David. Foyaball.com is the name of his website. He got to the bottom of that Spotify playlist, which just was crazy. And then Diana deleted her Spotify, or, scrubbed it. Um, it was a playlist that she shared with a guy named Mike. Like, it was just like, and it was like all this weird, like it's such a weird story. But the real part of it that I wanted to talk about tonight was the issue of insider journalism. And Jeff Pearlman, who's a journalist himself, he went viral this week because he posted a video asking why Jay Glazer gets a free pass for his intimate relationship with sources, and we are so hard on Diana Russini for sleeping with one of her sources. And I think, first of all, Jay Glazer's not having an affair with any coaches in the NFL. Like the issue that, and I saw Pablo Torre bring this up as well, and it's a fair point. It's a fair point to talk about. Now, Diana Russini obviously crossed a major line, but it is a fair point to discuss the issue of access and insider journalism, where Jay Glazer's having a barbecue with all the NFL head coaches, and he's getting chummy with all of them, and he's rubbing elbows, and he's getting information, and that's how he does his job. He works out with people, he gets people to become friends with him, and then he gets them to talk, and then he relays that information to his audience. And that is a very blurred line when it comes to journalism. So you see the diploma on the wall right there. I went to journalism school. I studied journalism for several years, and then was in the process of getting my master's degree at LaSalle until I got a job in TV and decided to move to Michigan. But that's another story for another day. So journalism ethics is completely gone in 2026. It doesn't exist anymore. What Jake Glazer and what all these other insiders are doing is not real journalism. It's pay for play, because they struggle to actually report the truth objectively. Because if they do report the truth objectively and it makes their sources look bad, well, then their sources are going to stop giving them information. And if their sources stop giving them information, well, then they're no good at their jobs anymore, and they're no longer of value to their employers. So it is this constant give and take where the journalist, air quotes, has to appease the source and get chummy with them and not report the bad stuff, only report the stuff that makes them look good. Or if they do report the bad stuff, put a spin on it so it doesn't make their source look bad. That is not objective journalism. So I think it is very fair to question what Jay Glazer and what these other insiders are doing to get that information. But it's not fair to compare the Jay Glazer situation, where he's having a barbecue with sources and coaches, to what Diana Russini is doing. She is taking it so far past the line that it's absurd. Like, it's egregious. Whereas what Jay Glazer's doing, I would say, is more in the gray area. It's a little more frowned upon, and it's probably difficult for him to report objectively, but at least he's not having an affair and sleeping with one of the coaches. If he was having sex with Sean McVay, we would be talking about it. But it's not fair to really compare these two situations. But I do think it is fair to have a conversation about insider journalism and access journalism, because I don't believe it is real journalism. And I think you are doing the audience a disservice, because the audience is relying on the Jay Glazer types to report the truth objectively. But if Jay Glazer is handcuffed because he can't report the truth objectively, because if he does, he makes his sources look bad. And if he makes his sources look bad, they stop giving him information. Well, now we're in this gray area. I don't think there's ever going to be a solution to this because we're in this currency in the journalism media world where people are trading access for favorable coverage. And I think it's so competitive now that it's just really hard to get true objective journalism. Frankly, that's why I think podcasts and sports talk radio are still a valuable entity, because we are not in the locker rooms talking to the players and the coaches directly and trading favorable coverage for information. We are reporting and seeing things objectively. We are watching the games, we are doing our due diligence, and we're giving you how we see things. We're talking to people that aren't on the inside. Because when you get across that barrier and you start dealing with the insider information, it comes at a cost. It comes at a price. And a lot of times that price is your objectivity as a journalist. And that is, frankly, the only thing you have. If a journalist fails to report the truth, truly, without any spin, without any, hey, I'll give you a favor. If you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Once the journalist crosses that line, they are not a journalist anymore. They are in some other realm. But frankly, in 2026, journalism's dead. People just want content, and people want tea. I don't even know if people want the truth. It's like a few good men. You can't handle the truth. I honestly think the truth behind Diana Russini and everything that she's probably done over the years to get the access and the information that she's gotten to get to the point of her career where she's at the top of the insider game. I don't know if people can handle it. I mean, you've read the reports and the rumors about what she did in Washington with Sean McVay. I mean, it's hard not to believe. Now, I'm not saying it's true, but it's hard not to believe it after what we're seeing now take place between her and Mike Vrabel. And if you think she's the only one who's gone down that road, you're crazy. I'm sure it's happened time and time again, where journalists, and again, air quotes on the journalists' part, are doing anything they can to get ahead in the industry. Trust me, it is a very competitive industry. It is not easy to be noticed in media. I've been trying for years. I'm the average white guy talking about sports. It is not easy to be seen, but I'm not willing to be immoral with how I go about my business. I'm just going to keep being me and authentic, and hopefully someone sees the value in it. And I think people have over the years, and that's why I'm somewhat employed. But there is this line that I think once you cross it, it's hard to cross it back. And I'm sure Jay Glazer is a really nice guy. I've actually heard he is a really good guy. But it's really hard to consider him a journalist at this point, because what he's doing is he's trading favors for information. And he's likely not giving the audience the full truth. Because if he was, he might make some of his sources look bad, and then they'll stop giving him information. It's hard to be chummy with your sources. I've tried it before. In sports, it's a little bit easier. But I remember when I used to work in news, I had a friend who was in the politics space, and I worked at New York One for years, and he covered the mayor, he covered everyone. And I asked him, I was like, how do you deal with the behind the scenes backstabbing and all of the, back alley, backroom deals that go on in politics? He's like, I just have to not report on it. And I was like, well, that sounds like anti-journalism right there. And he's like, I know. I've talked about it with my editor, and I said, this is what I saw, this is what I heard. But if I report this, it's going to make our mayor or our congressman or our councilwoman look bad. And a lot of times that stuff gets brushed under the rug. It gets pushed aside because you have to make the journalists are in this weird position where if they report everything they see, it's going to make their sources look bad. It's inevitable. It's impossible because everyone has a dark side, especially at the top of the power spectrum. I don't know if this ever gets solved in sports. We have gone so far down the rabbit hole, literally and figuratively speaking, with this Rossini Vrabel story that it is not a shock to me how many major media outlets have been relatively quiet about this. Think about it. Think about how many stories ESPN has done about the Vrabel Rossini drama because they know behind the scenes this is how the business works. And if they lean heavily into this, it's going to unwind a lot of their things going on behind the scenes as well. I bet every single major reporter at every major media outlet in the country on the sports side has some skeleton in their closet about how they got a piece of information. They crossed some line. They were where they were not supposed to be. They did something that they weren't supposed to do, and they found out information that they weren't supposed to find out. Sometimes it's good information. Sometimes it's information that is reportable. Sometimes they stumble onto a great story. Sometimes it's information that makes one of their people, one of their sources, look really bad. And they don't always report it. A lot of times they will use that information and trade it with the source for another story. I've seen that happen on several occasions. I remember, again, this is back in my news reporting days, we found out a story about, I forget, I think it was a councilman. I forget his position in City Hall. But it was a very negative story about bribes and dealings behind the scenes. And the reporter went to the councilman and said, I have this story. It's like a C plus, B minus story. I will not run the story if you give me an A story. If you give me some information that is so good, it's better than the information that I currently have. And they did. They gave him a great story. I forget exactly what the information was. But this kind of stuff goes on all the time, and the public is not privy to it. So it really is a fascinating give and take in the journalism world. And I think we're down a rabbit hole right now with this Vrabel and Rossini story that I don't even know. I don't even know where we go from here. But hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Again, like and subscribe to the channel, please. We're getting close to 1,000 subscribers, and when we get to 1,000 on YouTube, obviously it allows me to do more monetization wise, and that means I can do more for you guys when I do the show. So a short show this week, didn't have a whole lot to get to, but we do have some exciting things happening. I'm very excited to do the interview with my NFL guy this week, and we'll do a lot of breakout stuff from that on the draft and a bunch of other stuff. So I appreciate y'all tuning in, especially those who hopped on live. And we'll see you next week on the morning after.